secondary school level in Uganda. It's going to be presented by our Principal Research Officer, Mr. Thomas Kagoro. I don't want to delve much into introducing him. He will do a better job than I can do at introducing him. So please welcome Mr. Kagoro.
Our chairman board, members of the board, and in the interest of time, I want to stand on the protocol already observed. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've already been introduced. I've got Thomas, but I just want to let us inform us before the new curriculum was introduced, there were subjects that were already having continuous assessment as a component for assessment for the final grading. IPS was one of them. Actually, I would have thought this paper should have been brought before the other one, because it is kind of a precursor to what we have already had. Scholarly literature acknowledges the central role of formative assessment in improving teaching and learning process. I think this is a fact all of us as educationists agree with. And formative assessment is a process used by teachers that provides feedback by which they can adjust ongoing teaching and learning to improve achievement during the instruction process. For that matter, CA was introduced in IPS to make sure that the teaching learning process is improved. So continuous assessment is a periodic and systematic method of collecting information about learners' attributes. When this data is collected, this is what is used to improve the teaching learning process. When CA is used for information, for informing the teaching learning process, it is known as continuous formative assessment. However, CA is used for decision making beyond the classroom many times. And when that is done, this is known as continuous summative assessment. We already had continuous assessment in art and also those other subjects that we talked about, like technical and some of the languages. In Uganda, we are aware that in 1992, the white paper on education proposed a reorientation of the education system from a knowledge-based curriculum to skills-based, and that is how IPS was born. And to foster acquisition of the required skills in IPS, it was thought wise to introduce continuous assessment, such that the learners would be assessed as teaching is going on. And this is thought to have a number of advantages in as far as improving the teaching learning process is concerned. And this was, of course, a very good thing. The key question, however, is whether CA was achieving that objective of augmenting the teaching learning process. Was it working well? Did we see the process being improved as a result of introducing CA? In the statement of the problem, we have already indicated that CA is generally agreed to be a very, very important aspect in our teaching learning process because it facilitates the teaching learning among or within the classroom. And it fosters the skills that we have talked about. This is why CA was introduced in 2016 at core level. UNEB, as a routine, was carrying out monitoring on the implementation of this CA. And this had been done for over 5 years. It came out clearly that CA implementation was lacking in a number of areas. And some of these areas which came out were test construction and administration, record keeping, feedback, to mention but a few. And if I have to refer to the research that was presented in the morning, these issues are still persisting, even in the other subjects. This study, therefore, was set to explore the effectiveness of the implementation of CA, focusing on procedures schools follow in carrying out CA, then also looking at the competencies the teachers and learners have to benefit from the CA outcomes, and also how these results are being used in the teaching learning process. And of course, it is hoped that the findings shall improve the way CA is handled to impact positively on the teaching learning of this subject. But I think even beyond this subject, since now CA is being carried out even in the other subjects, these findings will also benefit those areas as well. To handle this topic, the study took on 3 objectives. The first objective was to analyze the procedures used to conduct students' continuous assessment in IPS art and crafts at the lower secondary school level in Uganda. Then 2, to establish the extent to which the teachers have the necessary competencies and support necessary to handle continuous assessment in IPS art and craft. And thirdly, to establish how the IPS art and craft CA results are used for teaching learning purposes at the lower secondary school level. And we thought handling these 3 objectives would help us to evaluate the effectiveness of the use of continuous assessment in IPS art and craft. To focus this study, we took on a theory, which is self-determination theory. This theory was propounded by psychologists Richard Wright and Edward Deci in 1985. It propounds that self-determination theory has been used in the education field for several years in continuous assessment.
CA is expected to act as a motivator
in real time regardless of how
to
far
both the learners and the teachers. The CA results are expected to help improve the teaching learning. The achievements that are made by the learners are supposed to impact on how the teaching learning takes place in the classroom. So teachers and instructional designers need to develop learning environments that are intrinsically motivating. And this is one of the strategies that was developed, the use of continuous assessment, so that learners can be motivated to learn under this system. Significance of this study. The study on the effectiveness in the use of continuous assessment for the teaching of IPS craft and art and craft is of course very crucial in the following areas as given here. The findings will help UNEB and NCDC to improve on the policies and guidelines on the use of management of CA. As we are already aware that now CA is very, these findings can be applied even in other areas. They are not restricted only in the art area. It will bring to light the challenges in implementing continuous assessment that may have impact on the quality of teaching and learning, because we are evaluating and looking in detail how CA is being carried out during the teaching of art and craft. The spirit behind this is that art now here is kind of a microcosm of what is happening generally, and there are lessons that can be learned from here. The possible areas of training in CA among the teachers will be identified, and the refresher process can be organized accordingly. The research will provide relevant knowledge and information to the schools about the implementation of continuous assessment. They need to know how this is being done, where the gaps are, and how this can be improved. It will also inspire future research activities in relation to continuous assessment. Here we are talking about IPS art, and of course my colleagues carried out a research generally to see how CA is being conducted. But I think interest will be taken, possibly also looking at individual areas, individual subjects following this. Methodology. The research design here, which was adopted, was a descriptive evaluation research design. We thought this was appropriate because this situation needed to be described. We needed to look at it in totality. Then we see what is happening. We come out with a true picture of what is happening in the schools. So qualitative methods of data collection and analysis in this case were used because we needed to describe this situation very well. Sampling techniques, a two-stage cluster sampling technique was used in this research. This country was divided or is divided into zones, and within the zones, as we know them in UNEB, about 16 zones, including Kampala. There are districts under those zones. So districts were sampled from each of the zones. Then the schools were also sampled from the districts that have been chosen. IPS teachers, director of studies, or deputy, because in some cases, deputy head teachers in charge of academics were used instead of those, were purposely selected in that whatever school had been chosen, the DOS and the deputies qualified to be part of this research. As for students in those schools that were selected who were taking art and craft, were randomly chosen. And here we use the research randomizer software, where we had to assign numbers and pick the 10 or 11. But in situations where the numbers were less than 10, then the whole group was involved in a focus group discussion. Data collection method, we had mainly three. We had survey, where we had questionnaires administered to the teachers of art, so that we could get the way they conduct CA in their schools. And to get deeper into what goes on in the schools, we had to conduct focus group discussions with the art and craft students. Data wouldn't have been complete without looking at the documents, because they are documents that are used in the management and conduct of CA, like the records, like the preparation documents, even the work of the candidates or students itself. So we had to do a documentary research. Look at how they keep the records, look at how they prepare for this, for CA and so on. So documentary research was very, very important here.
We should have reduced them.
As I already mentioned, we had the questionnaires, which of course did the survey with teachers, focus group guides, discussion guides were used with the IPS and art students. Then the checklist was important in trying to analyze the records and documents. And these documents were mainly with the head of department art, the deputies, and the director of studies. So they were looked at and guided. The procedure that was followed at the point of data collection, of course, after getting all the permissions from here, we got a letter that allowed us to go into the field, then also seeking entry in our data collection schools or institutions. We went straight to administer questionnaires to the IPS art teachers. Then after that, focus group discussions were held with IPS art students. We selected 10 in each discussion group. Where there were less, of course, we went with what was available in the schools. Then alongside, the checklist was utilized to collect observable documentary data and notes taken about what was being observed. Data analysis, qualitative approaches, as I said earlier, were employed for the open-ended items in the questionnaires and for the focus group discussion guide responses. However, for the closed-ended items in the questionnaire and the checklist, because we were looking at what is available and so on, descriptive statistics were used to analyze such data. Ethical considerations were taken care of. Consent was sought
from participants, and of course confidentiality guaranteed. All the information that was obtained was only used for the purpose of this research. Findings. These findings are presented. These findings are presented objective by objective. Procedures used to conduct students' continuous assessment. We found out that at least 50% of the schools had CA guidelines to conduct CA in art and craft. But there was something interesting. Of the 50%, they had different sources of the CA guides, as shown in that picture. I don't know whether it's visible for people at the back. 17% said they had got these guidelines from colleagues, while 39% had got guidelines from UNEP, 22% from NCDC, 9% from DES, and 13% they were following school-made guidelines. So something coming out here is that they didn't have uniform guidelines. They varied from sometimes teacher to teacher or school to school, which of course has implications in terms of quality control. We also looked at compliance with these guidelines. To what extent do they really comply to those guidelines which I talked about? 49%, not 46%, normally have approved for procedures for the coursework marks that are produced, while 22% display the marks that the students obtain, meaning the rest don't display the marks. And authorities receive from teachers around 32%. The teachers keep the marks for the students. So still here, various schools managed the CA differently. There was an important aspect that was looked at, that is generation of items that were being used in continuous assessment. Majority, which was a bit gratifying, sat as a department to generate and discuss the items that were being used. That was up to 38%. Then the others were able to moderate the items that are generated as a school, while others were able to proofread. And these are important procedures that we expect when you're generating items for administration planners. But we have those who already bought or obtained items from other schools. And also those who sat alone, generated and administered without any formal procedure of quality assurance. So this also brings out the status quo in schools, how items come up, and at the end of the day we expect the marks that we receive to be of similar validity and reliability.
Keeping of records, CA records. The majority, up to 58.7%, kept their records with the DOS or deputy in charge of academics. Then 12.8% kept them with the head teacher. But it was interesting, in one of the schools, when we asked the head teacher, when we realized he didn't have the record, how does he ascertain that the CA records are authentic? He said, "Look, for me, I just provide money for the teacher to take records to name. Whatever else happens, I don't know." Then, up to 26% of the teachers don't give their records to the deputy, they don't give to the head teacher, but keep in their drawers. They only produce them on demand. While a small percentage, but still worth noting, 2.2% had them in their residences. They were not even in the drawer, they were not in the staff room, but they keep them in their homes. This is a very precarious, of course, situation, the way records are managed by the various teachers. We are interested in knowing whether the CA results are communicated to the learners. We noted up to 77.9% of the teachers communicate and results. And we, from the interviews that we held, the focus group discussion that we held, some of the students, the groups, had this to say what I've represented here. They acknowledge that it provides, the CA results provide us with information on how the assessment will be done, because they are told when to do CA and so on. Then it helps us to know how we are going to be assessed. It enables us to prepare for each assignment. So here the activities are communicated through various ways. When are you going to do the assignment, what form of assignment, and so on. We tried to, in objective 2, we looked at teachers' competencies. We picked out the important competencies that we expect a teacher to have in order to have a good continuous assessment exercise. Up to 65.5% said we are comfortable with the scoring of scripts. This implies that the other percentage is not according to this. Then, developing marking guides up to 58.2%. Construction of test items, 56.4%. Compilation and so on. Using of the test framework, that is where there was even bigger trouble. Only 14.5% indicated they were comfortable using a test framework. A test blueprint, some of the respondents were asking us, what is this? They didn't know what a test blueprint is. And we expect a teacher to be conversant with all these if he's to be a competent, to test competently the students. Use of IPS art and craft, CA, for the teaching learning process. Up to 93.3% provided students the opportunity to know their CA results. I think this was a good picture. So meaning that up to 6.9% We are not providing the opportunity for the learners to know their results. Then 82.1% learners discuss with their teachers about their performance. We thought this was also fair, but there are still teachers who only give the results but don't discuss what comes out of those results and the implication of their performance. And yet we know that CA is expected to help improve the teaching learning process. In this regard, how CA is important for the teaching learning process, during the focus group discussion, a number of views which we thought were important, worth capturing, came out. Here they are only summarized, pulled out from the text, but they are worth noting. Students indicated that CA brings us closer to our teachers and it becomes easier to interact with them. That was from focus group discussion 27. Our teachers are able to adjust accordingly because they already know the kind of students they have. That was very important. Fine art students can effectively engage in the school business, like designing the logo, the signposts, making mingling sticks and school badges out of the work they do. These were quite captivating. The school has provided mentors for the students to follow upon their strong and weak points. It helps us to identify our talents as we build our skills and many others. But we have just captured these as examples and they're within the text. Ladies and gentlemen, from this work we concluded that the procedures being followed in CA for IPS art and craft vary from school to school, which is, of course, not a good situation. We'd expect to have a standard which these schools have to follow for us to be able to get valid and reliable results of CA. The teachers of IPS art and craft have the basic assessment skills, which, however, need to be updated on a more regular basis, because this research brings out that the teachers have shown they are lacking in a number of areas. Much as they are trying, they need to be assisted. Then the CA results from IPS art and craft are used to enhance the teaching learning process. From the kind of responses we got from the teachers and also the learners, the kind of responses they gave, we found out that there's some good use of CA results. In the recommendations, we are saying that Ministry of Education should organize more refresher courses to ensure pre-service teachers. That's right. More refresher courses, of course, for teachers who are already in the field, and also ensure pre-service teachers get the necessary skills before they are ushered out in the field. Then also, the ministry should emphasize monitoring of the CE activities. Many times they are left to whom it may concern, and even within the school itself, we find the administrators sometimes don't know what goes on with the way the CE marks are generated. Some only, as we have indicated, stop at receiving marks, but the processes that are involved are not monitored. UNEP should emphasize and strengthen monitoring of CA activities. We cannot sit and say everything is well. There is a lot that should be done to ensure that we get the kind of assessment results we expect. CA guidelines, well, the other day, for the first paper, we were cautioned giving recommendations for things that have already been done. But yeah, at least now we are harmonizing the guidelines as a board, how CA should be carried out. Organizing training and sensitization seminars is here very, very important. We are yet to reach all the teachers. Of course, we are still relying on the cascading mode. You train, the others train the other ones, and so on. But there's still a lot to be done. And of course, more research to be continued. This area is still very, very vital. Then for the schools, we are advising that they should have very strong approval mechanisms. Approval mechanisms. There should be control in the way the activities of CA are conducted. And also, the CA results have to be verified before they are sent to UNEP. Because it came out that many times these records are sent to UNEP without proper verification. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
Please give him a more than applause. Thank you very much. Now I will call upon the discussant. Discussant of this paper is Assistant Associate Professor Adiboni Zam Dennis. Please welcome Mr. Professor.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For purposes of recording, I should be using this, huh? Yeah? Okay. Before we start, may I request you stand up, please? Create some space, to move a little bit, okay? And do as the chicken does there. Okay, just watch the chicken and do as the chicken does.
kyali kirabira naye ate bakublockinze enkozesa ya Diana. Nkireete badde bamaze okugiteekayo. Okay.
Hello, Mr. Discussant, sir. We have agreed that this chicken should not be eaten.
KFC now.
I am here to report that I've had a very romantic relationship with you. Since the examiner and then later on as a reviewer of their researches, and then along the way also in crafting the UNEP journal, educational assessment. At the very inception in the labor ward I was there, and I'm still there watching how it moves. And I'm also here to express my difficulty in my role as an academic, divorcing it from a discussion of an action research paper, because I have had the unfortunate advantage of being a devil's advocate for PhD defenses, for master's external examination, PhD external examination, chair of a session, MC at a function like this. So distilling yourself to be this pure discussant of an action research paper, so that you're not going to look for the sand in the rice, but the cooked rice, for emphasis of what needs to be done, is my trouble. And I hope, as one of the discussants earlier said, and one chair said, I will live to that occasion, I hope. And I want to thank the researchers who have brought us here. I want to thank UNEP through its very able leadership, especially at the board level. The chair is here, and the executive director, those who are in the kitchen, for having made sure this comes to pass, and it comes to pass on a regular basis. It's not my first time. Other times we have gone to other hotels, but I didn't know we had such a beautiful facility as you did. And I'm here also to report that as we look at these works, all the stakeholders should be here, although my disappointment in here being a bit of sort of hearing is that I did not hear whether the people from whom the data were collected are present. If you are present, you put up your hand. If you are not, you will forgive my complication in the hearing. Yeah, so actually, it's there that this will have gone, and that is part of the discussion that we are going through. But that's not his problem, it's our problem. Next time better. My neighbors in Busoga usually have that phrase, next time better. Yeah, so, and we are here to confirm that the main aim of education is to make the educated uncomfortable with the way things are, with the way life is, with the way we look at things. So that's our main aim of education, and the main aim we are gathered here also. So that when Thomas brings us this good news, then we are able to say, okay, what is the bad news behind it, so that we also make it good news. And we are here to also remind ourselves that we shouldn't be playing the panopticon role. The panopticon is that facility which is built in a prison in such a way that all the prisoners think they are being observed, and yet actually there is no one observing them. You know, so in most cases, that is what we do at the institutional level in our education systems. To be seen to be in control when actually we are not in control. Why am I saying this? Because whose protocols do we feed into? Are we decolonized? These are the kinds of questions that I want us to be asking going forward from here. Is it a doctor that is fitting into the African medicine, or is going to use protocols that are Western-centric? Those are some questions that we will be asking going forward. And I want to take the blame on behalf of the universities. By the way, greetings from Busitama University, the one and only in Uganda on a multi-campus model. With my dean, Professor Lema, present here. If you don't mind, you could wave to the people. Yes. And we teach research. And then it's like you teach the children, they learn from others. So when we see mistakes, we have to take the blame. The parents are blamed for the mistakes of the children. So anything that is wrong with all the works that are done here, in as far as the technocracy is concerned, we take the blame as universities. So professors around here, please, let's take the blame. Yeah, for anything technical that is wrong with the works. But our main aim here is, what is the cooked rice that we can serve to the people out there? And so, I want to thank once again this organization and you who are here for being very vigilant. And I want you to be more vigilant now that it's coming to your turn to be the one on the stage to do the chicken dance. Right. So there are 7 things we want to look at in 7 minutes, but I have difficulty with time. I've been reading as a psychologist, the psychology of stupidity. And one of the definitions of a fool in the psychology of stupidity, it's a 968-page book, right? One of the definitions is, a fool is a person who once they have started, they don't want to stop. And another definition is someone who once they have stopped doing something good, they don't want to start again. I hope I will be able to fit within time, Chair. Because the way you're looking at me, I'm very suspicious. I want me to stop. So there are 7 things that I want us to look at. I will first cast the summary of the results and the implications, and we try to link this to what is happening in the global arena, and then we just ponder about it, and then we see what recommendations can be emphasized. The main thing here is emphasis on the recommendations to the stakeholders who are largely seated here, and also those who are not here. And I don't know how, Chair, is going to ensure that this reaches them. And then we see what future research directions we can take, and we can also suggest a few areas to improve this work, and I also make my conclusion. Now, this work has tried to observe the theory of change. Thomas thinks continuous assessment is meant to lift a person coming in the education system, consider them as an input, go through a process, and you come to an output that makes an outcome that can cause an impact. That's what Thomas thinks. So, continuous assessment becomes a very critical process in that process of change. And it links very well with what Bodo, rather Psychopoulos, said sometime back in 2020. And it is in his literature that continuous assessment can reduce dropout rates by improving student engagement. Just imagine, as someone suggested, one of my discussants here, say, what if we made it 50-50? That implies if the person is manual rather than more into cognitive, and the pass mark is 50, and they have passed the continuous assessment with 50, or put it even at 40, they can't fail to score 10%. Then it means the dropout rates due to the cognitive factor are not going to be there. Then look at the sociology. You are looking at the classroom where a teacher interacts with the learners in the process, because everything and everywhere becomes a classroom. With continuous assessment, everything and everywhere becomes a classroom. So they are under the tree, they are by the riverside, they are wherever, and this is in art and craft. So that implies we have a classroom dynamic that feeds directly into the values and ethos of our education. As let me refer to that 1992 white paper, not the recent one even, because even this builds on the other. And then we have a real world analogy here, that it is like a health checkup where you diagnose learning gaps. But this requires skilled doctors, the teachers, to act on the results. So his problem has been with the teachers, and it came out clearly in the results. So that means those who hold the stakes must go to the problem. I have a friend, when he was young, he used to fall sick almost every week. And then we had a native doctor who said, for me, I injected the problem in its eyes. The guy had a cough. So this guy mixed his concoction and injected him on the back. Because the problem was cough, he imagined it was on his back. So he injected the problem on the eye. And he has found out for us, the problem is there with the way it is being administered. So that's where we should go. And this is not just anyhow. There should be guidelines, there should be teacher training, then we do the assessment the right way, and we give feedback, which will eventually result in improved performance. So his results are summarized. He decries the varied continuous assessment procedures, and he notes competency gaps and underutilized feedback, and brings in the fact that positive impact of CA is possible. And this is one of the first of such studies in Uganda here. And so from here we can always ask for more. So what does this tell us? That we have different worlds of schools, we have the same country, we have the same national examinations board, we have different continuous assessment forms. So the question is it therefore fit for purpose? Okay, in my school, everybody primary or secondary school, the resources are not there. Then in a school next to this, I see students online, they are posted on social media. And what happens? You find they are really into the real hands-on and minds-on. So you are going to get results from everybody else's and this somebody else's for the same national function of assessing the students. Just think about it. So what does this imply? We are likely to be massaging rather than treating the problem. The problem is we are using classical test theory still, though we should have migrated long ago to the item response theory. All of you here being technocrats, I will not go into the details. We have the reality that we have a differentiated and differential education system. We are trying for equality, yet we should be moving to at least equity, although the desire is the liberation or freedom. That's where we should be moving. And this is what Thomas is telling us in his study here, that we should be aiming at next to resurrection, because we live between death and resurrection. So between death and resurrection, we have these realities: equality, equity, and liberation. So the link to global things. Number one, his findings are situated in Education 5. Education 5, we have been through Education 1, 2, I don't know whether we have reached 3 or 4, but the world is singing Education 5. We are going to look at it shortly. Then he still brings to the fore the fact that the world has gone skills-based, and there is a deep cry, and therefore a cry for quality assurance if we are to play fit for purpose. Fit for purpose. You know, we've been, I'm going to talk about it a little later also, talking about being competence-based. In the morning, I interacted with him. I told him, so the elephants have to become cows because cows are more useful. They give us milk, we use them for bride price and all that. So that's where we should be going. Everything that is almost like a cow must become it for now. Our focus is what can be done. Education 5 requires teacher training. And you can't give what you don't have, so they say. So in that case, teacher training has to be in such a way that they are tooled to give what they have. I have the, this time, fortunate disadvantage, not unfortunate advantage now. Fortunate disadvantage of school practice supervision. And what do you see? Students, today we are looking at the topic X, so turn to book page this. Now that is the activity. Next, activity of integration. I'm thinking, okay, so the brain of the teacher has been removed from their body and planted in the book. So, that it brings to the fore issues of equity. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially in our countries, the lower and middle income countries. And he found out that this is a common thing in really all low and middle income countries. Similar challenges in continuous assessment. Yet, there are countries out there, like Finland, which are doing it right, from who we should be benchmarking. And unfortunately, he has told us, and I'm going to emphasize again and again, we have ad hoc procedures which contrast with structured systems in those established countries where it is very systematic. So what we need to do is make the machine that makes the machine that makes the product. Make a mistake at the first level of making the machine that makes the machine that makes the product, then you're going to continually produce. At the universities, what do? We train the teachers. At the teaching institutions, what do? We train them. We, the makers of the products, how well formed are we? And the teachers become the machines that make the other teachers, who will eventually make the students. And then we expect a human-centered rather than a learner-centered education system now. That's what Thomas propounds in his findings. Human-centered means you teach this teacher not just to be hands-on and minds-on and competent in their own right for themselves, no, but with the other human being they're going to interact with in mind. So the end in mind from the very start. So that implies we have to always be conscious of the characteristics of this education. Human-centered, sustainability-oriented, values, creativity, empathy, and collaboration. That's another area now where we should be having questions, the collaboration bit. And it focuses on holistic learner development. I repeat, holistic learner development. I repeat, holistic learner development. That's where we should be going according to Thomas. And that is it. which implies our shifts will be from assessment of learning to assessment as learning. But his study is centered in the middle, in assessment for learning. And should it be assessment for learning that we should be privileging here, or we should be privileging assessment as learning, where we have the flipped classroom? So we therefore come to number 3, the pondering stage. How do we cater for diversity, equity, and inclusion in this? How is the visually impaired student catered for? This the study didn't bring this out, and this is something we should be taking forward from here. What about the one who has visual impairments? Okay, hard of hearing, of course, the mentally retarded, and you know the statistics from Lago tell us that we are about, when you count 10 people, consider 4 of them to have a mental issue in Uganda currently. Not current statistics as updated, but that is what the most recent tells us. So, what about the mode that is presented here? Different schools, different types of continuous assessment, all aiming at getting, and somebody's what has gone? You know, if you know everything, you're called a fool. So some things you need to forget. What about someone suggesting a 50-50? And where do you put those resource-constrained schools? Where do you put money? Someone who produces this art piece through another skilled artist and has used money to buy it. Where do you put that? Reflect on something for something and nothing for nothing in a Ugandan context, which is one of the commonest things that happens. So, how can we therefore trust these results? Because the examinations in our setting are high stakes. I want us all to go out as ambassadors of cleansing, because we are very saddened by the recent news from the board. But I want to believe that God is on our side. And this is probably something that was nipped at the tip. So, in the unlikely event that somewhere, somehow, the devil also tempts somebody, because of the high stakes nature, how do we trust the certification that is given? And the place of competence building versus monetization, that is what I'm talking about here. And in the studies, we have not had any Ugandan theory so far. The theories we're using are all Westocentric. Of course, theorizing is not an easy thing. And so, meaning, we can think of the extent to which continuous assessment is decolonizable or decolonized at the moment, or indigenizable or indigenized at the moment. Yeah, so those are some of the issues that the bill particularly me to think about. So, as a way of emphasis to the stakeholders who are here, I've had, of course, Ministry of Education and Sports is here, NCDC is here, UNED is here, of course, the giants, the universities are here. I will emphasize that as he recommends, let there be standardized guidelines. Let there be continuous professional involvement. Let there be continuous monitoring. But of course, unfortunately, this all requires money. Yeah, we are talking about money, we are talking against money, and the Bible says it is the root cause of not just evil, but all evil. The Bible I have says all evil. But without that root cause of all evil, life is stuck. So it all needs that root cause of all evil. So allocation of resources for continuous monitoring and development and all that is happening. For the schools, he also says, let there be peer moderation, digital record keeping, he suggests it in situ, and then more research is even recommended, and he recommends stakeholder engagement. The problem we have in Uganda is acting in silos. And the professor just said, I don't want my ideas to be copied by someone. Oh my God. Then you better find another word, because the definition of human is to live together. Human means to live together. The moment you start living alone, probably you're an angel, and your place must be in heaven, I guess. And that takes a lot of perfection to come to. So I think for those who continue to do this and who have the goodwill, the board, chair, you are here, you may have to facilitate more of research. Let there be more of the researchers, because now we see technology enhancement as a critical element. Stakeholder perceptions must be factored in. In the previous research, parental engagement was talked about. Here, we are also talking about it. And other comparative, of course, I know a lot of benchmarking is done with other countries. But I want to believe that more is needed. And we also have to have alternative frameworks like systems thinking and behavioral economics going forward. Right, and for the work itself, of course, I told you my difficulty in interacting with a lot of research works. I pray that it doesn't cause me problems with my wife, because that is the main thing now instead of my family, which is not good. This is a warning to you researchers who are here. So, because of that, the first thing I go for is the science in the research. So that I read this, and I'm going straight into these provocative issues, is because the science is good. Only that I wish student performance data was used. We will be able to draw more actionable conclusions. And I wish diversity, equity, and inclusion were critically looked at by way of moving beyond descriptive, what we call the everyday research, taking it to an analytical level, but more importantly, at this level, to a conceptual level. That is how research from descriptive through analytical to conceptual. And that implies we will be using multi-pronged approaches, theoretical, conceptual, philosophical, and so on. Implying, if he has used the self-determination theory, which I think is a bit, let me use the bad word, sloppy, for a good reason, then we'll think of so many other theories that can come in, like the constructivist theory that was used, the egalitarian framework that can be used, the utilitarian framework that can be used, and connectivism, for instance, can still also be applied. So you have a number of theories on which to stand, there being Westocentric notwithstanding. And we need to go global, and the mechanics of style. I've summarized everything to do with the mechanics of style. I'm not going to dwell so much on the research methodology. We are not here for a research methodology course. We are here to discuss issues, national issues of national importance. So the mechanics of it can always be done behind the curtains, including the mechanics, the tense, grammar, diction, semantics, pragmatics, formatting, and all of that can always be done behind the curtains. Yeah. So, my own conclusion is that we need this, although it is an unfortunate circumstance. There is no better thing to do now than testing the learners, to prove that they have learned. But otherwise, this wouldn't be necessary. It wouldn't be necessary. But there is no other better way at the moment to prove that the learners have learned the teaching that was taught. Therefore, we need to take it as such, that it has the potential to transform our education system, but there are critical gaps to do with the standardization, teacher capacity, and equity issues. And we need to adopt global best practices so that we can harness CA to foster creativity and skills alignment with the labor market needs, fitness for purpose. And that implies it should be reliable, valid, cost-effective, feasible, acceptable, and it should support learning. That is why he situates it in formative assessment or continuous assessment, though he brings in what he calls the continuous summative assessment, which Atiguni and Olema 2018 refer to as continual assessment. And by the way, maybe one of the reasons I could have been called is that maybe I've done a number of publications with Professor Olema in this area of assessment. So we call that semblance of summative assessment, which aims at making the students' examination machines as continual rather than continuous assessment. So we aim to support learning, and it will also enhance student growth, improve our teaching methods, and strengthen education quality. And for that reason, I want to commend Thomas for the work well done, and I want to thank those who thought I could come and discuss this for an opportunity to do so. May God bless you as you leave from here. Thank you very much.
Please give him a bigger one. What is his chicken? Thank you very much, Professor Tibuni. That was a very thrilling presentation and a very good reading of the paper by Thomas. So, ladies and gentlemen, I allowed him more time because he said he was looking at me with suspicion. So, yes. So we are going to have a general discussion of the two papers. For us to, we don't have too much time, so I would suggest that we try to be brief and focused when you raise your either reaction or comment. And I would advise that we avoid repetition. Please, only speak if you have any insight or angle. Don't regurgitate what somebody has said. I would encourage whoever has an issue to be respectful and constructive. You please be clear and focus on the papers. Let us not go outside these two papers and engage thoughtfully. Please be concise, meaningful questions, and you should bring meaningful questions and acknowledge over the authors. So we shall have 4 reactions. So people will raise either reactions or responses, whatever, it will be all questions using these little guidelines. So by show of hands. Oh, Chair, I have a little microphone.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I want to begin with the first research.
Before you proceed, I would kindly request the researchers to come back to resume these seats so that they'll be answering the questions as where are the researchers? The authors?
Yes, the presenters.
And my assumption is that the presenters are the authors.
Yeah.
And the researchers also.
With the discussant,
please, the discussants also, but they might not have the discussants, please. They might be also divide questions. Okay, let's have the authors Let us take this. So please don't take more than 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. In the first place, allow me to thank the two groups. Generally, when you look at what is presented today and last year, there is a big difference. Thank you so much for being here. Continue with the same spirit. Going to the first research, I would like to thank you so much, people, for what you have collected. I have just some few issues. The way we conceptualized management, looking at planning, monitoring, and reporting, was not so much clear, despite the other 6. For example, when we look at the GULIC, defining management in terms